Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. Welcome to today's video. So today we are going to be talking all about eyeshadow palettes because today I'm going to be doing the eyeshadow palette tag part 2 created by Samantha March and Ali Glines. They collabed again and did a part 2 to the eyeshadow palette tag, which I did do the first part last year, so I'll leave that up in the cards if you'd like to check that out. I'll leave it down below as well, along with the Samantha's and Ali's video. I'm sure you guys know and love them, but I'm so excited for today's video because I love eyeshadow palettes. It's definitely one of my favorite categories in makeup. It's what I have probably the most of, so I think today's video is going to be a little chatty. So with that being said, let's just go ahead and hop right into the video. So I'm gonna leave all the questions down below, so feel free if you guys want to answer them in the comments as well, or if you want to make your own video, that's cool too. I think it's really fun to see everybody's like palette collection and like what memories they have with it. I think that's the amazing thing with makeup, well, especially for me. I know like with perfume and songs and eyeshadow palettes, these three things literally will bring me back to a certain time in my life. And I think because I do a lot of reviews on these palettes and I do 3 looks, so it takes me a very long time to finish one video. I would say like about a week, that I can really remember where I was, what I was wearing literally when I was wearing these palettes. So they hold a lot of memory for me, so we're gonna talk all about that today. It's probably gonna be a chatty one, so grab your drink. I have green tea as always. Yes, I like to drink through a straw. So the first prompt is all-time favorite eyeshadow palette, and if you guys have been a subscriber for a while, you probably can guess the 2 that I'm going to mention, because these are the 2 palettes that I have been talking about for years. And when I say years, I literally mean like 4-5 years. And it's crazy because my makeup style has changed so much, but the products that I love and use, it's still the same. So if you guys can say it with me, first one is Give It To Me Straight, and the second one is It's a Princess Thing palette from ColourPop Cosmetics. So Give It To Me Straight is now discontinued. This came out in 2017, and ever since then I have been talking about this palette. Like, I've been raving about it. I have been saying it's like my favorite palette from ColourPop because literally there's just so much you can do with it. And when you think of 2017, it doesn't sound like it was that long ago, but if we just kind of like reality check, it's 2022 guys. So I have been talking about this palette for 5 years, and like I said, my makeup style has changed so much, and the fact that I still recommend this and still use it, still love it, still my absolute favorite, it just shows you how timeless and classic a palette like this is. And I really wish ColourPop did not discontinue this because it's such a staple. And let me just show you the palette inside. I'm sure you guys have seen this. It is a pretty popular palette from ColourPop, and I just really love this because you have the options of a warm tone look and then a berry look, but the colors are very muted, very romantic, and that's my style. I like very muted colors, very romantic, rosy, you know, I love that vibe, like very M Cosmetics aesthetic, you know. So this palette literally just has everything I need. Like, it has a good variation of mattes and shimmers. It's just gonna be like my all-time favorite palette, and I don't talk about it too much because it is discontinued, but I know a lot of you guys have it, so I still do want to mention it. As for the second palette, I believe this is still available. Last time I checked it was. So this is the first collab that ColourPop did with Disney, and it's still available. This came out in 2018, and it came out like towards the end of 2018, but still I have been talking about this palette ever since then. So it's been a good like 3 to 4 years of me just talking so highly of this palette. What I love most about this palette is the mattes. It has my absolute perfect mattes in here, and guys, if you can get it, if it's still available, I would highly recommend you get it now because it is a collab, so I don't think it's going to be around like forever. So I mean, grab it while you can. I think it's an amazing palette. You get a lot of beautiful mattes, but also a lot of beautiful shimmers as well, and I think it's such a great palette. I also think it's quite underrated, but nonetheless, these 2 palettes would have to be my absolute favorites. The next question is a new favorite palette, and that would have to be the Natasha Denona Mini Bieber palette. I got this very recently, and I actually put this in my project pan, if you guys keep up with that. I think this is just very ideal. It actually reminded me a lot of Give It To Me Straight. I'll put a comparison up on the screen for you. They are slightly different, but again, this just gives me a lot of muted romantic vibe, and I use all 5 shades in here. I use the two transition, the medium tone, the deep tone. The metallic is beautiful as well. I think just for a 5-pan palette, I love every single shade and it has become a new favorite of mine. So I have really been enjoying this, and you're gonna see me use this a lot because it is now in my project pan, which means I really do love it. So yeah, this definitely would probably be a new favorite. The next prompt is a palette that I keep for the memories, and I think a lot of people will probably answer the same palette, especially if you're like around my age, because I think we all got into makeup around when this palette was huge. And of course that palette is the Urban Decay Naked palette. I just have so many fond memories of this. Like I said, all my palettes, like, it just brings me back to a certain time. Even with Give It To Me Straight, it's a princess thing, but this palette brings me back to a younger time in my life. I know I'm still very young, but this brings me back to my teenage years. I think this was my first ever eyeshadow palette. As you can see, it is really well loved. I will never get rid of this, but I would also never use this again. I think at the time the formula was so amazing. I hit pan on Buck. Buck was so iconic. I have all 3 of the original Naked palettes, so 2 and 3 as well, but the original one just holds more value to me. It really got me into makeup. I remember with this palette, we went to Korea. The first time I went to Korea, it was a long time ago. I don't know, like 2013. It was just when me and Harry just started dating, maybe 1 year into dating, so it might have been 2014. But I brought this palette with me. It was probably one of my only palettes I had in my collection, and I remember 2014 was the year I started my YouTube channel. So I started it in September, but we went to Korea in January 2014. And I remember I brought this palette with me, and I remember, I don't know, it's such an odd memory, but like in Korea I really wanted to start a YouTube channel. I'm sure we all have this moment where we're like in the mirror, like just talking to ourselves, like being Michelle Phan, you know, like taking this into my crease. Like I use this palette to imagine me doing YouTube, and it's crazy to think now I am doing this as my full-time job. The next prompt is underrated palettes. So as you guys know, I'm your ColourPop girl, so all of the palettes that I know are definitely all from ColourPop. I'm not really too sure with other brands what is like really underrated, but I would say ColourPop is the brand I really know the best. I know all of their eyeshadow palettes in and out. Like I am your guide when it comes to ColourPop. So one palette from ColourPop I think is very underrated would have to be their High Tide palette, and I think this might have been underrated because it was a Ulta exclusive that they did bring over to ColourPop. So it wasn't like a ColourPop launch, it was like an Ulta exclusive launch, and then they brought it over to ColourPop. But I personally don't see a lot of people talk about this palette or really use this palette. But I remember when this did launch, a lot of you guys asked me if I was gonna review it, and a lot of you guys said that you saw comments saying that this palette was not blue enough. So this palette definitely is not like a true blue if you're gonna compare it to their Blue Moon. It's definitely very teal, but the teals in here are so beautiful and so perfect. They did such an amazing job with the undertones of the mattes and the depth. You get transition, you get medium, you get deep tones, but they all have a different undertone. A lot of times in eyeshadow palettes, you might get like 1 or 2 shades that look very similar. They might look different in the pan, but once you apply them on your eyes, they look the same. But this palette has a variation, like nothing crosses over. You have 6 mattes, 3 metallic, perfect ratio, and it's stunning. Like if you love blue eyeshadows or teal eyeshadows, like this is literally the dream palette, and I wish people would talk about this more. I did a ColourPop ranking. I did it for 2020 and 2021, but for 2021, which is when I got this palette and when it released, I ranked this in 3rd place. The next prompt is not a favorite but can't get rid of it, and when I saw this question I was like, okay, I know exactly which palette to mention, because every time I go and clean up my makeup storage, I do a declutter and I want to make up more space, I always say I'm gonna declutter these palettes next time if I run out of space, because I don't use them, but for some reason every time it comes around to doing another declutter, I can't let go of them for some reason. Like I don't know why, because they do hold memory for me, but it's not like such a big memory like for the Naked palette, for example. But these are the palettes from Zoeva. Who remember Zoeva, guys? I feel like they were so popular back in like, I don't know, 2016, 17, 18. But these are like their chocolate palettes. So I have the caramel, the cocoa, and the Blanc Fusion. I have all 3, and these really do take me back to a certain time. I reviewed these a little bit later when they launched. I didn't like review it when it came out. I reviewed these in 2018, early 2018, and I reviewed these at a temporary like place we were staying at, because that period of my life, seriously, like it was so hectic. I think within that year, 2017 to 2018, we moved 3 times, and the last 2 moves was in a span of 2 months. And if you guys have moved before, you would know how like stressful and intense that is. And that was my first time like moving all of my things out of like my parents' house, so it was a lot. And to do that in a span of that short of a period, you know, for someone that doesn't like change, for someone that needs everything to be like settled in, that was just really hectic for me. I was working 2 jobs on top of my YouTube. Like, I've always done my YouTube like a full-time job. It just never paid like a full-time, so I've always had other jobs on the side, and during that time I had 2 jobs. So it was like really crazy. I didn't even know how I like really survived that period of my life, because I feel like back then I just had a lot more energy. These just bring memories for me. I remember the looks that I created exactly from them. I remember the room. I don't know why I just can't get rid of these palettes. I know I should pass them on, but I don't know why I just keep holding on to them. Is it the colors? Because I love these colors. Like, I don't know, I just can't get rid of it. And the next question is favorite collab. And as you guys may know, last year in 2021, I had the most amazing opportunity to have my own collab palette with Oden's Eye along with Tina and Annette. I am going to mention my palette for a different question later on. I did want to mention the other remaining 2 palettes from Legendary Diversa. Although it is sold out now, I still want to mention it and highlight it, because genuinely I do think Giant Wolves by Annette and Hummingbird by Tina genuinely are such amazing collab palettes. Have you guys seen a color story like this? Like, the quality like is so amazing. Like, look at this deep grungy color story. You have multi-chromes, and for this price point, like, it's crazy. Like, Annette, gosh, like, this is such a beautiful palette. And then we have Tina's palette with Hummingbird. Like, guys, this color story, like, you don't see this color story from like mainstream makeup brands. Like, you really don't. And I think it's so special, and I think our collection, it was different. 3 different creators. We are all from different backgrounds, different cultures, different age, like different countries. But because I was a part of this collection, this collab, I want to mention another collab that I really love, which is Pony's collab with Morphe. I really look up to Pony. I think this collab with Morphe, it was such an amazing job. This palette literally is her in a nutshell. Some of the shade names are Korean. She hand drew the imprints in some of the shades here. I think she did an amazing job on this palette, and literally every time I do my makeup, I want to use this palette. I think it's so beautiful. And again, representation. We need to spotlight representation in this community, because it is very, very lacking. And then next question is your favorite palette in 2021. So obviously I mentioned Red Dragon was a favorite of mine. But the other palette I mentioned in my 2021 favorites is Magic Hour from M Cosmetics. This is such a dreamy palette. Although this is a really expensive palette, it definitely is a luxury for a 6-pan, but I think the look you can get out of it really is so dreamy, so romantic. I told you guys, my preference is muted, rosy, romantic, cozy. It's literally this palette in a nutshell. And you might look at the shades and think like, oh, I can easily dupe this, but there's just something different about Magic Hour that hits different. And the next question we have is a palette you didn't expect to love. So this was the 3rd palette I mentioned in my 2021 favorites, and that is the Cream Soda Quad from Colourpop. When I saw Colourpop was coming out quads, honestly, really was not that excited, just because I do prefer the 9 pans or the 12 pans. That's my favorite size of eyeshadows, and just in general from brands, I like having options, but not too many options. So I think a 9 pan and 12 pan is like a really good size. That these quads, I really like. I'm not a minimal person when it comes to my makeup, so when I saw this, I was like, you know, I'm probably gonna like it, but I'm not gonna love it. I probably won't use it as much. But Cream Soda, honestly guys, like, you can see my palette is literally like, I'm gonna hit pan on this shadow very, very soon. So I mainly use the bottom 2 shades just to sweep all over my eyes when I'm doing more of like a natural makeup look, or I just need like a good wash of color over my lids. I will go in with this palette. I've mentioned this before, but I don't really use the metallic shadows, which I should because they are really pretty, but I mainly use the two mattes in here. And I didn't really expect to use this palette as much as I did and really like fall in love with it, because I just thought I was just gonna like keep it in my storage, use it for certain looks, but no, I keep this in my top drawer. I use it all the time. You can see how well loved it is by how like wrecked the palette is, but this definitely was a surprise love for me, and now it's one of my staples in my collection. And the next question is a palette that sparks joy, and this is where I'm going to mention Red Dragon. I thought it was appropriate. 2021 was a really tough year for me mentally. Although so many great things happened, I really had a hard time with my mental health. I talked a lot about that in my Get Ready With Me where I wrapped up 2021. I'll leave that in the cards if you want to hear more about it, but it was a hard year, and palette to me literally was such a big highlight because again, the Asian representation, and just it almost felt to me like I'm getting taken seriously now, because I think even from my parents and just people around me, they don't really take what I do seriously as an actual job, even though I do earn money from this. And I think maybe it's because, you know, I'm just putting on makeup in my room in front of a camera, but it's like, no, that's literally just the surface level. There is so much I do behind the scenes, and I am really hard on myself. I really am. This is such a dream. I never thought I would be in a position where I would have a collab palette, and shout out to Patty. She put Red Dragon as her favorite collab in this tag. I'll leave her video down below as well. I love her so much. She is so sweet. But yeah, I literally like almost cried when I saw her like whip out Red Dragon as her favorite collab, and I'm just like, I don't know, sometimes I have like imposter syndrome. Yeah, palette really does spark joy to me. I have one on display. Next is the newest palette in your collection. So I wanted to mention a palette that I purchased myself that wasn't sent to me in PR. And the most recent one I got is from Alicia. This is the Glitterpedia eye palette. I got it in number 3, all of coral pink. And I got this last year actually. I still haven't used it. I've only swatched it, but I got it at Yoyoso and they gave me a free Roman mirror for free, like a little freebie, which is really cute. I've been using that in my videos. Alicia was one of the brands that I discovered last year that I fell in love with. I'm on my way to like just getting everything and trying everything from them. Love them so much, and they have 3 of these. They have 3 different color stories, but I saw this one and I was like, wow, this is like me in an eyeshadow palette. The muted coral pinks, the glitter, the deep shadow, like what more of a Judy palette do you need? And now onto the final question, which is what is the first palette you used in 2022? So I had to look back on my videos to see what I was filming in the beginning of the year, because I have a memory of a goldfish. I think the first couple of looks I did this year, they were eyeliner looks, so I used eyeliners. I didn't really use eyeshadows, but I did do a tutorial inspired by the Pantone color of the year, Very Perry, and I actually used a few palettes, so I will just mention those because technically these were the first palettes I used this year. I'll leave that tutorial up here if you guys would like to check it out. But the first palette I used was In a Trance. I just took one of the shades. I took the shade Own Your Power right here. That is Very Perry actually. And then I also took Novena from Anastasia. I took the shade Soul. That is a really nice Very Perry color, just a little bit deeper. So I took that. I took one shadow from each palette, so like I don't know which palette to count because I used a mixture of all. And then lastly, I used the Game Beauty Fantasy palette, and I took these shades Ethereal and Celestial. So I took 2 shades from this palette. So they definitely have a strong color story here. Yeah, but these are the first palettes I used. That was the first tutorial of this year as well. And that is the last question. If you guys would like to answer all of these questions in the comments or just one of the questions, let me know. I think maybe one that holds a good memory to you, that would be really nice to read, because it's just crazy how like these certain things can take us back to a certain moment more than like a photo could, you know. But yeah, that is pretty much it for today's video, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed watching. If you did, if you could, give the video a thumbs up for me. I would appreciate it so much. Thank you so much for watching as always. I love you so much, and I'll go ahead and see you in my next video. Bye!